I'm about to interview Brian Dean. If you don't already know who Brian Dean is, he's kind of a big deal in the SEO scene. He's got nearly 500,000 subs on YouTube. He's the owner of Exploding Topics. He has multiple courses on SEO and is most prominently known as the owner of Backlinko.com, a prolific SEO blog that ranks for pretty much everything. Or should I say, former owner. Brian recently sold Backlinko in a multi-million-dollar deal to SEMRush, and you can bet your buns I'm going to ask him about it in this interview. Let's get started. Brian, first up, thanks so much for joining us. Why don't we start off with a brief introduction to who you are and what you're up to in the world of SEO?
So I'm most known in the SEO world for a blog I started called Backlinko that I recently sold to SEMRush. And so I'm not doing as much in the SEO world now that I sold the site, but I'm still working with SEMRush on a part-time basis on that.
Yeah, nice. So let's go through the full timeline. Like, what did you get your education back in the day? And then how did that end you up into SEO?
Well, I studied nutrition back in the day. That was my thing. I wanted to be a dietitian. I got a master's in nutrition and I started a PhD program in nutrition at Purdue University in Indiana. And I hated it. I hated Indiana. Sorry, Indiana people listening to this. I hated my advisor. It was horrible. And I was like, I need to get out of here. And it was the best thing that ever happened. I'm so glad it was horrible to the point where it pushed me to go. It wasn't one of those situations where it's like, man, it's not so bad. I can kind of stick it out for a couple of years. It was like, I need to get out. This sucks. So I left and I ended up getting a job offer in New York. So I'm like, perfect. As I'm driving there, they call me up and they say, oh, due to the financial crisis, there's a hiring freeze, so we can't actually hire you. This was in 2008. Yeah. And I was like, okay. So I just, drove, instead of driving to New York, I drove to my parents' house and just stayed in the basement, just being kind of a bum for a while. And I read this book, The 4-Hour Workweek by Timothy Ferriss. And I was like, wow, okay. Anyone can be an entrepreneur. I thought, you needed to be some sort of like superhero to do that. And I definitely wasn't, because I was, unemployed living in my parents' basement. So I was far from a superhero. And that kind of led me to building websites and learning about SEO and, how to get traffic to these websites that you're building. I was broke, so pay-per-click was out. SEO was the way. And over time, I eventually, created a bunch of sites. They failed, got hit by an update, built a bunch of sites. Those get hit by a different update. And then in 2012, I started to put the pieces together with an affiliate site in the personal finance niche that did really well, really fast, using white hat SEO, which I had no experience with up to that point. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Maybe there's, I want to learn more about this. But when I went to learn more, all the advice was vague stuff like create great content, build relationships with other people, satisfy users. There was nothing practical on how to actually do this stuff. And I figured, if I'm looking for this, there's probably more people looking for this than ever. So why don't I create a blog that sort of documents what I'm doing and is the site that I would want?
Nice. It's interesting, like hearing your story of nutrition being shitty enough to where you were kind of not only forced to look for something else, but the crappiness of that makes you dead glued into making the new thing figured out. Like I had the same experience with electrical engineering. Kyle Roof is a lawyer. Most lawyers end up hating it after they get the degree. And I would say I had to go through that to get to where I am today. Would you say the nutrition path was a necessary step into becoming Brian Dean Backlinko?
I think so, man, because if I didn't do that, I would probably have a normal job or something. Because in my world growing up, I never had entrepreneurs in my entire family. Like both sides, up and down. I didn't have an uncle that started a business, like nothing. So for me, the idea of starting a business was this crazy idea. So it's not like, oh, if I didn't do that, I would have done something else, started a SaaS company or something. No, it was like, it had to be this sort of weird path that introduced me to it, because otherwise I had no influences in my life that would have pushed me in that direction.
Yeah. God bless Tim Ferriss, right?
Absolutely.
So what's one thing you wish you knew when you first started with SEO?
I think I wish I knew how to like scale up. I didn't know how to do that really well. I'm still sort of learning it now, but I was one of those people who's like, I want to do everything myself. Control freak is the derogatory term people use, but it's accurate that, And I realized to scale, you have to let go quite a bit. And if you really want to scale, like with a capital S, you really have to let go and have, other people scaling for you. So that's something I wish I learned early on. I'm glad I was sort of quality control in the beginning, but I wish I learned these skills, which they are skills, to hire people that can create content, hire people to help you optimize your stuff, hire people to help you build links, and then even hire people to, make the whole thing go. It doesn't have to be you.
Totally, totally, completely agree. Well, let's address that elephant in the room: the sale of Backlinko to SEMRush. Now, your site had some crazy stats. DR89, that's freaking hard to do. 600,000 traffic per month. It used to rank, where it still does rank, for words like backlinks. Like, that's insane. What went into the acquisition, and what can you tell us about it?
Yeah, so I can basically talk about anything that's already been revealed at some level publicly. So, and of course, I can always talk about like plans and feelings about it and whatnot. But basically, it was out of the blue an email that I got from someone at SEMrush that said straight up, like, we're looking to acquire somebody. Do you want to be acquired? And I was like, maybe. Like, I had been asked about that from other software companies in the space before, but I wasn't really interested. I was kind of like, this is my baby. I don't really want to sell it. It makes a lot of money. It's an easy, like, it's not stress. It's not a stressful business. Like, it's the perfect business model, really. So why would I ever want to sell this thing? But over time, I built this other project called Exploding Topics, and have been spending more time on that, working with my co-founder Josh, who I love working with, and it was different. It was this new challenge. It was a subscription business. It was building something from scratch, building something that's not a personal brand, that had no tie to me. I was like, this is cool. This is fun. And with Backlinko, I was trying to manage both, and it was pretty stressful trying to run two businesses at the same time. And this came at a time where I was sort of debating what to do with Backlinko. Should I just, maybe try to scale that up and have other people involved, like Brian, like has been done with Copy Blogger back in the day, try to like make it more of a platform for other writers and other people? Should I just abandon it and just go all in? Like, I didn't know what to do, and this came at the perfect time. So I was definitely open to it. And then within like a week, we had the terms at a high level ironed out, and then of course due diligence and whatnot took a long time. But yeah, it was perfect timing. And I didn't want to sell to like a private equity firm. I wanted to sell to the right partner, and SEMrush was perfect because they have a ton of authority in the space. They have a lot of knowledgeable SEO people, and they really wanted to keep it kind of Backlinko as it was, as opposed to just absorbing it into some bigger thing. So on all levels, it was just like a no brainer for me to say yes.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense, because I look at diggity marketing itself too, and just that's just gonna die someday unless this unexitable personal brand type blog gets the right opportunity, and the right opportunity showed up for you. You saw an exit, you took action. It's awesome. This you touched upon a question that I wanted to ask next. Like, what do they plan to do with the domain? Are they going to 301 it, let it sit standalone, or what?
Uh, I mean, as of right now, you can go to the site. It's still up. There's no set plans on what to do in terms of that.
Mm-hmm. Can you talk numbers? Seven figures, eight
No,
figures, nine? Okay.
I can't
Okay.
talk numbers because they're a public company. It's not even like I can't talk about it contractually, which I can't. It's also legally because um, they're a public company, so can't reveal any sort of insider stuff like that. But it was a great offer, I think, and I'm really happy with it.
Mm. Well, I guess people will find out eventually, because public company, they have to show their numbers, what they bought, stuff like that. So yeah. What do you ever look back and think, like, how the hell did I get here? Like, you were in your basement not too long ago trying to figure out how to do this SEO thing. You started a blog because you wanted to provide value that didn't exist. Do you ever think you're going to sell that blog for seven figures?
Oh no, no way in hell! I didn't think it was going to be anything. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't think I thought it would be like maybe a couple SEO people would read it and it would be interesting, and it sort of just took off. I mean, I definitely never planned for it to be my main thing at all. Never mind a business that I would sell to like a public company someday.
That's
Um,
crazy.
yeah, it's absolutely crazy to me. So no, it wasn't in the plan at all. And towards the end, it was more like it felt more deliberate. Like, oh, I want to go from point A to point B, and I was able to do that from 7 years of working on the site. But in the beginning, no, it never felt it was never planned to be anything more than a little side project.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, all the best ones start off with that way. Moz was like that too. Just people blogging about filling a gap for knowledge. I'll ask you some more questions about the acquisition later, but I want to move on and ask you about your various income streams. Like, where does your income come from? If you don't mind giving like a proportionate breakdown of each.
Well, until recently, it was pretty much 100% courses with Backlinko. So with Backlinko, I stopped doing consulting like 6 or 7 years ago. I don't do any services, so everything was 100% course revenue. If you don't count crypto and things of that nature. But and then Exploring Topics, which I launched about 2 years ago, that started to generate money and became profitable about a year ago. So, but that was still only like 10%
Mm.
of my income at that point. So I would say Exploring Topics now, well, now that SEMRush has bought Backlinko, it's, it doesn't bring in any income for me anymore. But with Exploring Topics at its, Backlinko's height, and Exploring Topics is, where it was when I sold, it was around 30% of my revenue. 70% was Backlinko.
Got it. I didn't know the courses went along with the sale. That's crazy. So, are you going to continue supporting the courses and creating content for them, or is now their baby?
It's going to be collaborative. I mean, I'm part-time working with them for the foreseeable future. So that's one of the things that I hope to be working on. Actually, that has been announced. I'm working on a new course for them. That's going to be a SEO crash course for beginners, which I felt kind of the space lacks as a video version, so to speak, of the Moz Beginner's Guide, which everyone reads and
Mm,
should read if you're getting started with SEO. There isn't like a course version of that like kind of walks you through some of the steps and holds you by the hand. So that's essentially what we're creating, and that should be ready pretty soon.
nice, nice. So I didn't want to let you off the hook and give you a completely free ride on this interview. I wanted to give you some challenging questions, and the first one I have for you is one piece of criticism that I hear about your content is that a lot of the strategies that you recommend would only work for someone like you, someone with a DR89 website that already has traction, returning visitors, someone with a name that can get data studies out there and stuff like that. What do you think of that criticism? Do you think that there's any grain of truth that your tactics don't work for the everyday site and only work for certain types of sites?
I think it's definitely true that it works better if you have a name and authority, and your site is known, and you're known as an expert in the space for sure. I mean, I think in business and with SEO, it's hard, man. It's hard to build something from scratch and grow it and build it. So you should use every advantage you have, whether that's an email list, a Twitter following, a TikTok, whatever you have. You should use it. So it's funny you mentioned that, because with Exploring Topics, I'm purposely not, you know, putting myself out there with any of the stuff we're doing, partially because I don't want to do that anymore, but also because I kind of want to see how this stuff works without any name recognition. So a couple of things I want to point out with that. First of all, when I started doing these things, no one knew who I was. And most of the people that I reach out to, even today, have no idea who I am. Like, we're in this sort of SEO bubble. Like, I'm not famous, man. Like, no one knows, like, outside of our little world, no one knows who Brian Dean is. So when I email most people, they don't know who I am. So with Exploring Topics, we tried out two strategies recently that worked well. And Josh, my co-founder, did all the outreach. Or in some cases, we hired basically a VA on Upwork to do them. And they worked great. One of them was we found all these pages that listed 404 pages that were cool and interesting 404 pages, interesting 404 pages, 404 pages that are funny. And what we did is we looked at all the pages that were listed on those, and a lot of them weren't funny or interesting anymore. They're just generic 404 pages. So it's kind of like broken link building, but we had to actually check each link because they were broken because they were 404. So we checked each one, and a lot of them, maybe 10% of the ones listed, were just generic pages now. And they had a screenshot of the old one. This is so interesting because of X, Y, and Z. So what we did is at Exploding Topics, we created an interesting 404 page, which was a page that brings up a topic from our site, and you can click on a button and it generates new topics. And then we reached out to all of these 404 page lists and said, hey, you have this list from Intel. Intel is on your list. It used to be this interesting thing. Now it's just a generic 404 page. If you need a replacement, here's our replacement with a screenshot and a little description. And again, this is the VA doing the outreach with Josh. I didn't do any of the outreach whatsoever. And we had like a 12% conversion rate on that campaign. So I think if you're creative and provide value, this stuff can still work. But there's 100% truth to the fact that if someone knows who you are, knows your site, it's going to work way better. Everything's going to be so much easier. So yeah, there's definitely some truth to that.
But you can build your own recognition and your own brand while you're doing that stuff too. It might even be the fuel to what built your brand, is these crazy data studies and stuff like that. So, I mean,
yeah, exactly. It's the same thing. It's easier to rank in Google if your domain rating is, 100. Like, of course, well, you should get your domain rating to be 100 then. Like, what's the point of kind of complaining? Like, go and do it and get there. And like you said, a lot of this stuff will help build your authority along the way. Like, if your site is not well known and you publish an interesting data study, a lot of people will share that on Twitter, even if you're not known. And then that'll help you get that authority and start building it up. Will you get fewer shares than if you publish on Backlinko? Of course. Will you get fewer links because people don't know your site? Of course. But it's still a really effective strategy, even for smaller sites.
Yeah, you got to start somewhere. And you touched upon something that I have a personal, maybe it's self-doubt about. I have this doubt that you could plug me into like a Fortune 500 business and I'd be a good marketer for them, just because I've always leveraged my personal brand when I start a new business here, there, or there. It's interesting that you're going into exploiting topics purposefully, trying to handicap yourself. Is it because you want to see if you can do it? Or is it because if you want to exit exploding topics, it's harder if your name's attached to it?
Yeah, it's mostly that I want to have it so it's a business that has no personal brand attached to it for an exit or just scaling in general. Like you found, Matt, like you can scale a personal brand, like Gary Vaynerchuk, he's a personal brand, but he's also a walking empire. So it's possible to do it, but I don't even want to do that anymore, to be honest. So for me, I want to build a company that doesn't need my personal brand. Plus, like I mentioned, outside of the SEO world, people don't really know who I am. So for me to step out, I don't think it would even help all that much. So it's not really to be like, oh, I want to prove it that I can, build a site without a personal brand. If I thought it would help a lot, I would probably still do it. But I think what really helps with certain businesses, if you want to grow them to scale, is like a sales team, a funnel that works, that's tested and tweaked, lowering your churn rate, building a great product. Like those things I'm more focused on now than any personal brand stuff.
Yeah, it's not like exploding topics is a direct SEO tool where you would maybe disadvantage not to use your name and use that to market it. Like it's kind of a separate but similar business. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if we're targeting SEO, if we branded it as a keyword research tool, then of course, like I would change my mind. I would do the complete opposite, and my face would probably be on the homepage. But for this, it's really for investors and enterprise people to discover trends before they take off. Some people do use it to find topics to write about, but it's not really our main use case.
Yeah, sure. Cool. Well, let's start to dig into some of your SEO strategies and practices. I wanted to start off with niche selection. How do you decide what's a good niche to get into? Like, why did you decide exploding topics would be a good business to start?
I mean, for me, it was also to scratch my own itch a little bit. I had seen some trend spotting things out there, but nothing really that good. Like it was more of I think this is a cool area to get into, and I don't see anything solid out there. So let's start something. Now, to be clear with exploring topics, I bought basically a beta version of it from Josh, my co-founder, and it was an acqui-hire. So I hired him, and now we work on it together. So he started what was essentially the beta version of it. But I was already working on something similar on my own, which was going horribly. I hired a developer. It was like trash software. It didn't work. And then I saw this. I was like, okay, well, this actually works. It's way better. So let me just buy it. And nice. It's worked out great. So for me, I was already in that space because I knew that like there's Google Trends and there's other tools that you can use, keyword research tools that will show you how a keyword's trending. But there was nothing really good for topic discovery, like these kind of weird trends that are happening that I wasn't aware of, that I should be aware of, whether it's in business or marketing or technology. It was like these unknown unknowns. There really wasn't anything out there to do that. So our job is really to bubble up these unknown topics. That's what I was trying to build. And Josh built something way better to start with.
That was a question I had for later on. Like, what is the difference between exploding topics and Google Trends? It sounds like exploding topics is for discovering what you don't know you don't know. Because how do you search for that in Google
Yeah.
Trends? Like, what do I not know? But I guess
Exactly. Yeah,
exploding.
Google Trends is yeah, Google
Yeah,
Trends is fantastic if you want to dig deep into a topic you know already. Like you can get all the data state by state and country by country, and you can compare two trends and see how the trend lines compare over time. It's fantastic for that. But like you said, the problem is you're just staring at a blank search bar, and if you don't know about it, then it's not really, it's hard to discover new trends. So yeah, we're more of a discovery platform as opposed to a search. We're adding more features for kind of a Google Trends ish thing that you can search for trends and whatnot. But for the most part, our bread and butter is a technology can find the trends, and then we manually curate them to discover the best ones and then add them to this database that people can search through, and then we email and whatnot. So yeah, it's really just for those unknown unknowns that you, every time you see a trend on exploding topics, you should be like, wow, I didn't even know that existed. That's crazy.
yeah. I see tremendous use case for SEO. Like, if you have any kind of authority site in, we're in health and fitness, or if you have golf or whatever, like you want to monitor health and fitness. What is the new supplement that's trending? What's the new diet? What's the new workout? Like, that's super helpful to jump on early. So I see tremendous SEO
Yeah, it is.
application.
We have quite a few media brands that use it for that exact reason, especially with
Mm,
product reviews, right? Like, what's this product? Either a specific niche product or a product category that's trending, and they could jump on it before anyone else does. So their competitors are writing about it a year later, but they're already ranking for it, getting traffic. It doesn't show up on a keyword research tool for like a year because there's such a lag period with a lot of those.
nice, nice. Speaking of keyword research, what is your keyword process? Let me guess, you use SEMRush.
Of course, of course. So I mean, I used SEMrush way before this ever happened. I mean, I posted a screenshot back in the day, uh, which I had to look up. I knew I'd been a SEMrush user for a while, but I didn't realize I'd been a paid customer since 2012. So basically,
Hmm.
I had been a paid customer for 10 years before the acquisition. So I definitely used SEMrush as my go-to keyword research tool well before this. And basically, yeah, I use two different strategies, and that's pretty much it. One is competitor analysis, still probably my favorite. It's a little bit copyish, and you don't get that first mover advantage. But nothing beats just putting a competitor and just getting all their keywords that they rank for. At the end of the
Totally.
day, that's usually the best approach. But also, I use exploring topics or other tools to try to find these kind of lesser known trending topics, and then I'll put them into SEMrush to get more of a detailed breakdown of them. Um, and from there, it's just keyword selection. I'm getting a little less picky about keyword selection because I'm finding those keyword difficulty estimates are relatively accurate, but sometimes you'll find one that seems like impossible to rank for, and you'll rank for it instantly. And then you'll find one that seems easy, and you can't get near the first page. So it's
Hmm.
not like that as simple as it seems. So for me, I'm more looking at commercial intent. I'm more looking less at search volume, less at competition, and just looking at the monetization potential of that keyword. The higher the cost per click, the more it makes sense for my business. Yeah, the keyword research tool shows it gets 10 searches a month. Who cares? Let's go for it. It's perfect for us. And that's sort of my keyword research processes. Yeah, I still juggle the search, the search volume, the keyword difficulty. I look at that stuff, but I'm tending to emphasize more and more cost per click.
Got it. Got it. So after you do your keyword research, like for a new website, what kind of content would you suggest someone starts on first?
The absolute lowest competition stuff you can find. Like you want to find negative keyword difficulty if possible. Like you want to really find something that's super easy because you have no authority, but you can still rank for these. If there's nothing there, you can rank for it. Like even if you have no authority.
Yeah.
So I would definitely focus on the lowest authority possible. I wouldn't worry that much about search volume, about cost per click. I'd really just try to just get something out there because if you go after something that's competitive, there is a chance you could still rank for it. It's very unlikely though, and it'll take time. So in the meantime, you're getting no traffic, no traffic, no traffic. Because I think you go from page 7 to page 5 to page 3 to page. It doesn't make any practical difference. Like your rank tracker is going crazy. Like, oh, you're ranking for all this stuff. It doesn't bring one extra visitor to your site. It makes no difference to be on the second page or the fifth page in practical terms. But if you target a trending keyword, you can get in that first page pretty quickly, start to get some traction, get some traffic, and then from there you can build up. So that's one of the first things that I would do. And for exploring topics, when I launched that site, it was brand new, no authority, no nothing, and we went after these really low competition terms to start with, and now we're starting to target the more competitive stuff. But that's only after 2 years of building up authority, and we have a pretty good domain authority, and only now we're going after really competitive stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it makes sense too. I like to look at it as like a rock climbing analogy. Like you have to get those footholds, the lower ones, in order to reach the top, taller ones. You have to start somewhere. It starts with getting like the little bits of traffic you can. You're a big advocate of what I don't know what to call it, home run content, like the ultimate definitive guide, big statistics pieces and stuff like that, data studies. What's your argument for these?
People link to them at the end of the
Link,
day. I
link
mean,
bait.
yeah, for the most part. I mean, for the guides, it's a little bit different. I put them in two separate categories. For
Mm-hmm.
me, the studies are great for getting that surge of traffic in the beginning and links over
Mm-hmm.
time, because studies are just people like talking about them, no matter what you find. People are going to argue about them on Twitter, probably, especially in our space. People are going to
Totally.
argue about them. Yeah, especially SEO Twitter. They're going to argue about the findings. People are going to talk about it. People are going to share it with their colleagues, which is an underrated share. Dark social share, in an email to their people. Oh, I saw this study that found X, Y, and Z. But more importantly, over time, people are going to link to that because people really tend to link to data. If you look at
Yeah.
most links on your competitors, they're mostly data. I discovered this by accident. I was looking at Moz and the Beginner's Guide to SEO and seeing who linked to them to see, who's linking to this thing. And what I was shocked to find is that literally like 75% of the links were citing this stat from the guide that said like 60% of all Google searches had never been searched for before. And everyone was just
Mm.
citing that stat, citing that stat. And I was like, man, this guide is amazing. It's provided value to so many people. And a lot of the links are citing this one statistic. So with a study, you have that, but like in spades, because you have a lot of stats, and it's original. Like their stat was from Google that they found it. So for you, you're actually generating new data that people can use, and people start searching for, click through rate or average diet length or whatever. They'll search for these things, and because you have so much authority, it may not be optimized super well for these keywords, but you'll still tend to rank for them. Google will sort of shoehorn you in there when possible. And you get in sort of this virtuous cycle. You get linked to, and then you rank better. And then every time journalists search for this thing, they're going to find you and link to you. For guides, it's a little bit different. Guides are more to rank directly because for a lot of these introductory keywords, or people don't know what something is, or they're just kind of learning about it, a guide is a perfect format for them. They don't want a list of 10 tips. They don't want a case study. They kind of don't even know what the thing is, to be honest. Like that's why you put the what is X. It's partially for the featured snippet, but also because that person may not have they may have heard it before, but read it on Reddit or something, and they go over and like, oh, let me see what this thing is. So you can provide the intro, a little bit more intermediate, and then advanced all in one page. So that's why guides, I think, are a great format for those specific type of topic keywords.
Mm. Well, okay, going back to I guess statistics. I don't know what to call this one. One of your most famous posts, at least in my eyes, is the we analyzed 250 billion ranking factors, and here's what we found: the correlation studies. Like, what goes into a piece like that? Like, what's the whole process, and where do you get the data from? Who writes it? How do you get it all dressed up and looking good? Like, what's the whole operation look like?
Yeah, that is a tough one to cover in a podcast. There's a lot that goes into it,
Mm,
but I could give you sort of the broad strokes. The number one thing is, yeah, finding the data. I recommend, if possible, finding a data partner. This is probably one of those
mm,
unfair advantages that you talk about. I
mm,
email SEMRush or another tool and say, hey, I want to do a study. Would you provide the data? And a lot of times they will. Now, they're not going to provide the data you can just use. They're not like, oh, here's all the findings and just publish it. They'll provide the
yeah.
raw data, and then you need data scientists to go through it and run the correlations. I work
Mm,
with someone in Germany that did those for me, and they did a great job. So no matter where the data was, whether it was raw or whatever, and sometimes they did scraping. At the end of the day, scraping can be good. But if you're like, I wouldn't start with one of these like I analyzed X million things and we discovered Y. That's what I did when I started. My first one was that, and it was a nightmare. I did well at the end of the day, but it was so stressful. I had no idea what I was doing. And I was like, I stopped doing them for like a year and a half because I was like, that was horrible. That was a horrible experience. Then I realized You don't need to go do the millions of things. Like two studies that we did that were relatively easy did super well. One was a voice search study where we analyzed a bunch of voice searches, and literally someone on my team, I bought him a Google Home, and he just asked questions over and over again and recorded the answers with audio and then got them transcribed, and our data was done. So it didn't, that's all it took. And then at the end of the day, we just ran some simple correlations. We hired someone from Upwork to do them, and that was it. We did another one, which was looking at B2B content marketing, where we just had someone manually look at, I think it was like a couple hundred B2B blogs, and look at some of the factors that they had, whether they have comments, whether they have share buttons, the content length, simple stuff. And that was interesting. That was cool because no one had done that. And it only required a sample size of like 150. So it didn't require this massive data set or all this crap. So it was much easier to do. And with the visuals, I mean, that's just finding a good designer to turn them into charts. Someone that's really good at data visualization, you can find someone at Upwork or 99 Designs to do those for you. And then you have a pretty awesome piece of content. You have some original data. You have some cool visuals that people can use. That's going to be better. That's probably going to perform better than 10 tips for whatever generic post.
Yeah. Yeah. How about the writing itself? Do you actually take the data, analyze what your data scientist serves up for you, and actually do the writing for the content? Or do you hire writers? If so, okay, so it's you. Do you write every single piece of content that went on Backlinko?
For the most part, there's a couple I didn't, and I always cite when someone contributed or wrote for the site for the sake of transparency. But like 95+% was me. Like, for example, I have this thing called the Content Marketing Hub on Backlinko, and that's something that Kyle Byers from Growth Badger helped me with. He wrote a lot of the content. He helped me find a lot of the topics. So that was a collaborative effort. So when I announced that hub, I said thanks to Kyle Byers for helping contribute a lot of the pieces for this. So yeah, I mean, it's 95% me, and whenever it wasn't, I always made sure to cite that person so people knew that.
Damn, what an effort, dude. Congrats. What about Exploding Topics? Because Brian Dean's not running the show anymore. You're getting some help.
No, I'm basically editor-in-chief of the blog. I don't write anything for that. I think I wrote one post maybe when we first started, but now it's just 100% freelance writers, and we scaled that up. We're publishing like 3 or 4 posts a week now.
Nice.
But as of now, they all get edited and approved by me. I just don't trust anyone else to have that level of that standard that we need for everything to get published on the blog. And it's working. That's another reason. Like, it's working. We've right now the blog gets about 100,000 visitors a month, and that's about 10 times what it was at this time last year. And we're probably on track for like 200,000 at the end of the year. So I don't want to mess up that process. And it's not that hard I realize how much easier it is to edit something than write something. It's like infinitely easier, especially when you hire good people. If you're getting people are sending you crap, it is really difficult to edit. It's time consuming and frustrating. But at this point, from hiring literally 100 writers, probably for Exploring Topics, we're at like 5 or 4 that deliver great work consistently. So it's just a matter of like me being nitpicky about X, Y, and Z and sending it back. And usually it's pretty good to go after that. The hardest part is just finding topics, sending it to them, make sure all writers have something they're working on, making sure it actually gets published. Like, it's really just an execution game at this point and a scale game.
Yeah. Where do you find the writers though? Where do you find your A-player writers?
On Upwork.
Okay, sweet. Cool. I got some more questions about content. One is a challenge for this idea of the definitive guide, right? So there's this movement right now it's been around forever, but topical authority is like a hot topic in SEO right now, where if I wanted to rank for best protein powder, it's not going to work to write the definitive guide on protein powder and just do the best piece of content. You have to write all the supporting content and become a topical authority on protein. Talk about what is protein? Can protein get you fat? Do chestnuts have protein? Like all this different stuff. Do you think that simply writing the best piece of content, a single piece of content on something is good enough, or do you need to get into this whole topical map type stuff?
I'm not a big believer in the topical map. And the reason is just because I've seen so many exceptions to the rule that I don't think it's required. I'm not saying it's without merit. I think there's merit to it. But I've seen, like JamesClear.com rank number one for like intermittent fasting for years, even though the site has nothing else about intermittent fasting on the site. Backlinko, we created a lot of stats pages last year about different companies, like how many users they have and things like that. And we have ranked number one in Google for like how many Teslas are sold each year. We have nothing else about Tesla anywhere on the site, not even mentioned.
Mm,
And these are pretty competitive keywords. So
mm,
I think it helps. Like, it's always better if you can do that, but I don't think it's like, for exploring topics, I've never once mapped out any sort of topical authority, which we just go after individual keywords, because at the end of the day, why would Google rank a page better just because you wrote a bunch of stuff related to it? It doesn't mean that's any good. Like, I published this guide to protein, and then I published 6 other articles about protein on my site that are garbage. Or even if they're good, they don't have any links or any authority. Why would Google say, oh, this guy must be an expert on protein? He wrote 6 articles about protein. That's impressive. He must know what he's talking about. That's not really how the algorithm works. It wants to find the best result for that keyword. And most of that comes from how people interact with that specific page, and also the authority of the site and the page, neither of which has a ton to do with how many supporting articles that you wrote. So for me, I think it's nice if you can do it, and usually that'll naturally happen anyway, because you just usually cover one topic pretty thoroughly, but I don't think it's required to rank.
sure. Yeah, the reason I wanted to ask you that is because I remember when Backlinko was small, like there's only a few 30, 40 pages or something like that, yet you were ranking for backlinks. Like, that's challenging. And there's probably 50 articles or 200 articles you could write about backlinks, anchor text, and all this type of stuff. So it's an interesting approach. I guess you could say like everything is an SEO technique, right? Topical authority is an SEO technique. Backlinks are an SEO technique. If you're doing only one of them, maybe it'll work by itself, maybe it won't. But when you combine all these things together, like if you have a bunch of backlinks, if you have DR89, maybe you don't need to worry about that kind of stuff. If you don't want to build backlinks, then you do need to have perfect topical authority or whatever that is. I guess it's just kind of like looking at these things in isolation, but in real world practice, why would you ever do anything in isolation SEO? You get all the guns running right away. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. I think that's probably what it comes down to. When you see these exceptions, they're probably, exceptional in some way. But I wanted to answer your question specifically because you were asking if it's required.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I
Totally.
don't, like I said, I don't think it is. But like I said, it could probably help. And why would you not do something that could help you if you want to get it all together? But in my opinion, like I said, most of the time you're going to hit this stuff naturally anyway. Like, if you're selling protein powder on your site, you have an e-commerce protein powder site, and you have a blog, you're going to be talking about protein all the time. So you don't need
Yeah.
this keyword mapping stuff. I think it's just going to happen sort of naturally.
Fair point. Fair point. Here's another question about like the data studies and stuff like this. We kind of touched upon this earlier. So I've done a data study or two on diggity marketing, but I would never put that kind of investment in for like one of my rinky dink affiliate sites that only gets like organic traffic and doesn't have like a brand, unless I had like a preordained and pre-planned like outreach plan with journalists lined up and stuff like that. Do you think that there's a risk for the everyday like affiliate blogger to put all this investment into a data study?
Yeah, I mean, there's no guarantee that anything you do in marketing is going to work.
Yeah.
So, and with a big study, that's why I don't recommend doing these million things, because they're really expensive and time consuming to run. And like you said, it could be a total dud. You reach out to these bloggers, reach out to these journalists, and it's just crickets. I wouldn't say you wasted your time, but it's pretty close, and you wasted a lot of time and a lot of money. So if you're a rinky dink affiliate site, first of all, I wouldn't recommend being a rinky dink affiliate site, because you're so at risk of getting destroyed in an update. But the more you build up your authority, you're a little bit more durable to update. So the number one thing I would recommend in that case is creating like original data without a lot of effort. Like I mentioned, those sort of scan 100 websites in the protein powder that sell protein powder and come up with the average price of protein powder. Now you have that piece of data on your site. So when people search average price of protein powder, you're going to show up. And a lot of those people are bloggers and journalists. And that's what I'm finding from doing a lot of this for exploring topics is we're creating stat pages like crazy. Some of it's original, some of it's not. But the key is to get in front of people as they're searching. I call it reverse outreach. So instead of reaching out to journalists, you're getting in front of them when they're searching for data. And a lot of times, if you're targeting like protein powder stats, it's probably going to be competitive and you won't have a chance. But average price of protein powder, that's something that journalists are searching for. There's almost no competition for it, and there's a high link intent. Like those people are probably searching for a source, or what's the biggest protein powder company? What's the biggest supplement company? Those are
Sure.
journalists, and then they're going to cite you. And a lot of times they'll cite these random sites. Like if you look at these, they're just rushed or lazy or both. They don't care what your domain rating is. They don't know what domain authority is. They just see a stat that they can cite in their article. It makes it look a little bit more legit, or maybe their editorial process requires, 4 external links, so they add it. So that's what I would recommend in terms of stats, not this huge study, like you said, Matt, because there's a risk that it could just fall flat. And we've published some that didn't do well. And it's totally unpredictable. I have some that I'm like, yeah, let's give it a try. It's pretty. We have a data provider that'll hook us up with the data. I can write it in like a couple hours. Let's put it out there, and it crushes. And we have others that I'm like, press release, journalist plan. I'm gonna do all this stuff, and it doesn't work. So it's not totally in your control. A lot of it's randomness. So that's why I recommend, if you're gonna go this route, definitely start small.
Yeah, got it. Here's a community question regarding content. What's your thoughts on this emergence of AI content writers, and how does that fit into the content game?
I have mixed feelings about them. Every time I try one, at first, I'm always like, this is unbelievable. This is Skynet. Like, we're all going to get taken over by robots. Like, we're dead. Then when you actually use it for a little while longer, you're like, this doesn't even really make sense. It's a little hit or miss, but for most topics, they don't really deliver anything that great. So my feeling is there's content that's just like beginner. Here's the basic information on something. Here's sort of a summary of what's out there. It can actually do that pretty well. You're basically already, if you hire people on Upwork or anywhere else who just regurgitate, they're basically an AI that's just doing it for you, right? They just have 5 tabs open. They're having it process in their brain and just regurgitating it. It's exactly what the AI is doing. It's just a human. That's the only difference. If you want something truly original and researched, that's what can separate you. That's why for exploring topics, we're really focusing on like highly researched content that AI can't do. AI never cites a source. They never link to anything. They don't self-update. They don't add visuals. Like, we're just trying to do that stuff so we don't have to worry about AI. If you're going after stuff that, if you see AI content and you're like, oh my God, our entire site is like this, you might be in trouble, honestly. So for me, I think for that sort of introductory stuff, it actually does a pretty good job, especially with human editing, or for creating content briefs or outlines. It can do that pretty well. But I don't see it as a huge threat.
Sure. No Skynet yet, folks. Let's talk about on-site optimization. How do you define like silo structures, like this perfect silo tree, and like uniform interlinking? Like, how do you go about that?
Not at all, man. I like to keep things really simple when it comes to SEO. I, do interlinking basically with editors. When they edit stuff, I tell them just link to whatever makes sense for the most part. And maybe there's a higher priority page that we want to add an internal link to, but that's about it. For me, I'm old school with internal linking. It sends authority from one page to another. It keeps people on your site longer. Those are my 2 goals. I don't map anything. I don't have silos or what are they called? Content hubs or anything like that. I mean, I have hubs on Backlinko, but there was nothing strategic about the topics. There were just, what about content marketing? Would people want these sort of introductory, sort of Wikipedia style articles about, and then they're interlinked because they're all in the hub. Do I think that probably helps? Maybe a little bit, but I haven't seen a huge difference in how those perform versus like a random blog post that has some, internal links pointing to it.
Sure. Keep it simple. Let's get into link building. I heard you like it. My first question is, how big is your PBN network? I'm just kidding. What was the most pivotal backlink technique that helped Backlinko?
It was 100% the Skyscraper technique.
Okay.
Yeah. I was starting out with, go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
No, please. I was just going to ask you about Skyscraper. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I was just starting when Backlinko was a rinky dink blog that no one knew about. And I was starting to, I was posting on the Warrior forum to get traffic. Like, that's where I was at. Cool. And I would check my Google Analytics, and it was pretty flat for a while because, SEO just takes time to kick in. So I was like, I knew this stuff would probably rank, but I was like, in the meantime, kind of, what do I do? So I created this 200 ranking factors post,
Mhm.
infamous now Google ranking factors post, and did a bunch of manual outreach to get people to link to it, and it worked great. And that gave me the fodder that I could write the
Mm,
Skyscraper technique case study, and that's really what sort of put the site on the map and put me on the map, was that case study. But the technique itself was also huge because I built like a dozen links that were pretty good to this page. And when you have two links, a dozen new links can make a huge difference to your rankings and traffic, and it
for
did.
sure. Nice, nice. Dude, when I try Skyscraper these days, first off, I don't try it anymore because I gave up. But when I try it these days, the only websites that respond that I would actually accept a link from counter with money. Is that just how it is, or am I doing something wrong?
I mean, it's how it is. The quality of your replies to outreach is usually a reflection of your quality of your outreach.
Mm,
So garbage in, garbage out. Like if you send a generic, hey, I was looking up blah 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 today and I came across your thing and I found this other thing. Yeah, that sort of transparent stuff is just going to get a generic reply in return. But if you're able to do something creative and unique, like I said with the 404 page campaign that we did, that can work. Or even just old school broken link building, where
mm,
the link is broken and you have something that's better than the original, then a lot of times they'll add your link. We did that early on with Exploring Topics too. Again, this was Josh doing the outreach, and we had a really high conversion rate on that one, like 15%, because people were linking to the Exploring Topics tool as opposed to a piece of content, which was a lot easier to slide into these best tools for whatever type of post. But the
nice.
same applies. Like we were really purposeful about finding something unique for each person. Like he even looked up what college they went to or where they lived in LinkedIn and was like, hope things are going well for you in Boston and whatever. That level of outreach helped get these, quality replies. So I would say, yeah, if you're just sending these generic outreach messages, you're going to get a lot of these. And even if you send some good ones, you're going to get, if you send the best outreach email that's ever been sent, some people are just going to reply with $100. It's just going to happen, especially now more than ever. But there are still so many legitimate sites that if you can improve their content somehow and you reach out personally, I think that'll always work. And this campaign we did with the 404 pages that did well, that was like a month ago. So it still works well if you are a little bit creative and send some solid outreach emails.
So it sounds like the days of, it sounds like, okay, the pretty much most of the process is still there. You create some awesome piece of content. You probably still scrape your competitors and look at their backlinks to find your prospecting list. But the days of loading up a single template in a tool and just blasting out everyone else probably isn't working anymore. And you need to get individual and authentic with it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When I did the Skyscraper technique back in the day, that's the exact process that I used. It was queue up, 250 generic emails and blast them out. And it worked great. That definitely doesn't work anymore.
Got it. As I was preparing for this interview, I heard you say in another podcast that broken link building, as you just alluded to, still works pretty good, but most people are just doing it wrong. Is there some trick to it, or what's the deal?
I think the main trick is to find links that aren't technically broken. I call it the moving man method, like we did with this 404 campaign, because links that are broken are easier to find than ever. You used to have to go page by
Mm,
page and use check my links in Chrome, and now all the tools have some tool to just find all the broken links on a site and even drill down into whether they're internal links or external links or links back. You can find broken backlinks to a site. Like they're so easy to find that it made it sort of a commodity strategy.
yeah.
So the number one thing I would do is try two-part outreach where you're sending broken links and then you ask them, do you want a replacement for any of these? I have a replacement. That way
Mm,
it's not overwhelming someone with one message, because when I first started doing this, we were sending these like long messages like, I went to your site, I found this page, here's like 8 broken links, here's a replacement for one. The person just throws their hands like, this is too much to kind of process in
sure.
one go. Instead, you're like, hey, this page has some broken links. I don't even say I was stumbling and any of that stuff anymore. I just literally say, your page has a bunch of broken links. I can point them out and find replacements. And then what we do is we find replacements for all of them, not just the one we want. So say there's 4 broken links on a page, we'll provide replacements, whether it's archive.org or a lot of times the page just moved. It's still on the site somewhere. And it's not a competitor of any kind. So we just provide the new link for that. That way, you're just providing a lot more value. And that broken link building campaign we did about a year ago that worked really well. That was where we would find replacements for not just our tool on the list, but all of them. So one of them that was broken that we targeted was Google Correlate, which is this old Google tool that they abandoned and eventually shut down, and that we were trying to get Exploring Topics to be in that spot. Even though it's not the same in any way. These people had 15 best tools for whatever, and they only had 14 because one was broken, or they only had 12 because two were broken. When another one's broken, we would mention a competitor, or a similar tool. Like if the other one was a keyword research tool, we'd say there's also Answer the Public, which is very good, or another keyword research tool. And that way they have kind of one-stop shopping. We do all this work for them. That's the level that it takes now to stand out and to get someone to reply.
Got it. What are the first links you would build to a brand new website? Like Exploding Topics, what are the first links you built there?
We started on probably, yeah, that definitely was one of our first links for sure. Luckily, I had all these, free tools lists that it was easy to put it in there. But again, it's only one domain, so it has limited power. The first thing we did actually was launch on Product Hunt. That was huge. That link is no follow, obviously, but it got us a lot of links on other sites because it just got it on people's radar screens. It's just there's a certain eyeball effect that if you have enough people with eyeballs seeing your stuff, some are going to link to it, and you can't draw a straight line between it. Like you can't say, oh, this person saw this Product Hunt thing, so they wrote about it. But I noticed after that, honestly, one of the first things I would do, we did were our podcast interviews like this, because as you know, Matt, like people are looking for guests that are interesting and unique. Like, of course, you would love to have like Tim Ferriss on the podcast, but you would also just want some random guy who's like, I ranked my affiliate site and it's making like 7 figures a year. You would want him on to like share all his stuff. And that's the kind of thing you can do if you're just getting started. You have anything to share. So with Exploring Topics, I had asked Josh to go on a bunch of podcasts himself, even though no one knew who he was or what Exploring Topics was. He went on Mixergy and talked about how I bought it, like any angle we could use. We went on Product Hunt and he talked about how their podcast and talked about trends in technology. And we went on other podcasts to talk about trends in technology or fitness or whatever podcast it was. We just contacted them and say, hey, we have a bunch of interesting trends in this niche. We'd love to, go on and talk about them. And the response rate was really high. I think I only went on one. He went on a bunch more. So that's one of the first things we did to get those nice homepage links. Another thing I would try to get those homepage links just to start with is Harrow, Help a Reporter Out. Yeah. Very hit or miss, a massive grind. But if it hits, it's pretty good. And I feel like it's actually getting a little bit easier than it was before because a lot of people just have given up because it's so hard. And it's a little less competitive than it used to be. So yeah, those are some starting things I would use. And that's maybe a little bit of guest posting too, if you have legitimate guest posts on a site where your link is in the bio and everything, like 100% above board. Because what you don't want is your link profile to be like 20%, exact match anchor text guest post links or anything like that. So we did a couple of guest posts in the beginning, but they were really like Google guidelines, link in the bio, sometimes no follow and everything like that.
Sure. Got it. Cool. Let's move into some technical SEO. Like, what do you do to validate your site's technical health? Are you a screaming frog guy? I know SEMRush has a crawler. Like, what are you using?
I use SEMrush for the most part. I like Screaming Frog, but it's way overpowered for the type of sites that I'm running. Like with Backlinko now, I think we have 500 pages total indexed. You don't need Screaming Frog to figure out if everything's going well in that department.
Yeah.
With Exploring Topics, it's a little bit more because we have a lot of topic pages that get indexed, but it's still only like 900 pages or something. So all you really need is like Search Console to tell you if there's any indexing problems, if you have to see your number of index pages, if it spikes or drops, something's wrong. I feel like that's some cases more useful than any third-party tool. And then I use just SEMrush Site Audit to just see if there's anything technically wrong. Now, a lot of times those things are nitpicky. They'll tell you like your H1 is the same as your like. I tend to just focus on any like serious problems, but if your site's small, even less than 10,000 pages, I think that those are enough. With Screaming Frog, we're talking about like enterprise sites, e-commerce sites, news sites that have like tens of thousands of pages. I just think for most sites, it's totally overpowered and unnecessary.
Yeah. I love Screaming Frog as a tool. No knock to the folks at Screaming Frog if you're watching this, but like I just think it's a nerd's tool. It's a SEO nerd's tool. Like, why wouldn't you want a UI? Like, why wouldn't you want it
Yeah.
nice and wrapped up
Or
with like
cloud.
little, yeah, or cloud, yeah, totally. But I get it. For the big sites, you need just a basic crawler that's going to run on your machine.
Yep.
Um, Talking more about exploding topics, what SEO techniques do you feel got the best gains for exploding topics?
There are two that worked really well for us. One was it still is, stat pages are the big ones. So
Yeah, I saw
compiling stats
those.
or creating
Yeah.
stats, those are just absolutely crushing it. And we're scaling. We're publishing like two of those a week now. We
Mm.
have kind of two different stat pages that we're going with. One is like X stats. So, fintech stats, software stats, whatever. Like those are quite competitive, believe it or not. And they get quite a lot of searches, but the link intent, as I call it, is not that high. Some of them are just people doing like, a paper for their college essay or something. So a lot of them don't even convert in terms of links. What do the best for us are these specific stat pages, which are targeting a question people are asking, and they want to know a number. An answer is a number, and usually
Sure.
they're writing something that's going to be published online, and they'll link back to you. Like one of our best ones is how many people own Bitcoin. That in a
Mm.
keyword research tool is going to show up as like 10 searches a month. It's a lot more than that, and also obviously variations of that. And the link intent is really high. Some people are just curious, but a lot of people are like writing an article and they'll link like, X million people or what percentage of people own Bitcoin. We have another one, how many cryptocurrencies are there? That's the other big one we get so much traffic to that one. It's insane. So that's just a lot of people are just searching for it. But then if you look at the links to that page, you can see that a lot of the anchor text is, there are 22,000 cryptocurrencies and they link to exploring topics. So that has been the best for us in terms of links. And it still is. Like I'm a huge fan of reverse outreach. The other thing that's worked well for us is going after these in the early days, these trending keywords that we're sort of riding the wave now. Like
Mm.
some of the things were like, um, NFT startups, anything related to NFTs, we got in super early, so we're writing about that, and that's of course it ebbs and flows as NFTs sort of like rise and fall, but that tends to bring in a lot of traffic. So yeah, those are the two: is like the stat pages for links, and then low competition stuff that's has the future growth, so you can sort of ride the wave. It's a pretty powerful combination.
It sounds like you have to do this keyword research like outside the box. Like you can't just plug into an SEO tool. It's not going to tell you you should go for NFT stats or like how many NFTs are made in a day. Like that doesn't exist in SEO keyword tools. So what does it take? Like do you sit down with your team and have like a brainstorm every Monday? Like how do you think of these?
Yeah, part of it is just brainstorming and keeping tabs on what's trending in your niche and looking at
Mm,
it as less of a news item and more of a keyword opportunity. Like if you see something
mm,
happen that's changed in your industry or a piece of news comes out, it's like, what are people going to be searching about around this? And that's where the
yeah.
people also ask box in Google is really helpful, because
Mm,
if you search for these, a lot of times you'll find that they'll show, if you search for like the root keyword like blockchain or Bitcoin, they'll have questions around them, and sometimes they're just random people on Reddit, and not it's not really what you want. What you want is something that's going to be, people want data, they're hungry for it, and there's nothing out there. Then you can get in there, man. You can rank. Google will find out quickly that you're the best resource. You're actually providing that answer, and you can rank pretty quickly for these. But yeah, there's the keyword research tools will sometimes bubble these up, but it'll show volume at like 10 a month, 20 a month, just because
sure.
there's a lag period on it.
I can imagine that's where exploding topics becomes handy. I'm also imagining like so I watch like Graham Stephan on YouTube for like financial advice. Like whatever he's going to talk about, it's going to get a million views and that's going to be hot at that moment in time. He's usually talking about trending stuff. I'm sure that's happening in fitness, like more plates, more dates was just on Joe Rogan. Like what are they talking about? Natty or not, all these types of topics. Yeah, you got my mind stirring and I think I'll have this brainstorm meeting with my team on Monday. So thanks
Yeah,
for
it's
that.
it's worthwhile. You only need one hit, really. Like it's very hit or miss, because the problem with a lot of these is that they end up being fads, and you
Mm,
go off. I'm very wary of targeting keywords that aren't going to rank for like years and years, but you just don't know. Like something's going to
yeah,
be
yeah.
huge for a while. Like when like keto started, who knew it'd still be around and still massive? Like it could have just been easily another fad. So you don't know. And another diet probably started. We don't even remember that fell off the map. So there's a risk factor involved, but these aren't like really hard pieces to write. These aren't these stats, original research things. These aren't ultimate guides. These are hiring someone to like go find the data. And sometimes you have to produce it yourself, like with the number of cryptocurrencies. We had to, go to CoinMarketCap and CoinGecko and sort of filter out, dead coins and stuff like that. But it wasn't that hard. And we create something original because people are using AI writers or whatever, and in the meantime you're creating something really cool and original. The ROI in that is usually going to be a lot better.
Nice. I love it. Cool. So here's some rapid fire questions from the community. The first one I got for you is, how do you go about debugging stuck or lost rankings on a site?
Yeah, it's first of all, I look at the pages that have lost traffic. That's my first move, because if you just look at the traffic to your site and it drops, it's hard to know where the drop is happening. Is it your homepage? Is it this page? Is it X, Y, and Z? So for my first, I always go to the landing pages report in Google Analytics and look at what pages dropped. And then I don't usually do anything. Like, I think it's tempting to just make a move. Yeah. Your best bet in 9 out of 10 times, just to let it ride. Usually they come back at some level. And sometimes I look to try to improve the content and update it. And that usually gives it a boost. But in most cases, a drop, I've been through drops and updates and everything. At this point, I can tell you the best thing you can do is to do nothing for like a month. If it's still at the same level or hasn't started to improve, then you can start taking action on it. But at least then you know which page is dropped. If it's across the board, like you just fell off the map, there's usually something site-wide that needs to be taken care of. Like maybe you have a lot of dead weight pages that are holding back your rankings, or things like that. So I don't want to say it depends, because that's such a cliche in our world. But at the end of the day, the number one thing is to identify, is this from like 5 pages that dropped? Is it from all of our pages that dropped? In most cases, it's a few pages that are driving the drop. And you can, go in, tackle those, and sort of turn things around, or it'll just turn around on its own. But yeah, I would wait 2 weeks to a month, not just do your own, still publish, do everything as normal, and then go back and see if they still drop. And if they're still low, you can always improve them or update them, or maybe it's a site-wide issue, like I mentioned, with technical SEO or dead weight pages or something like that.
Yeah, great answer. Great answer. Next one, I was going to say off the record, but this is definitely on the record. But how do you think Google actually detects EAT?
I think it's mostly links, to be honest. I'm not a big believer in the author bio stuff. Like because you could just make that up. I mean, totally. I could just write an article and say Brian Dean got his PhD and he has an MD from, UC Berkeley and blah. They don't know if that's real or not, or this has been reviewed by a doctor. And also, I always look at exceptions to the rule, because algorithms don't really usually have that many exceptions. They're a computer that just says, if they see an input, this is what happens. And Dr. Axe got absolutely hammered in the 2018 Medic update. That guy's a real doctor. His stuff was pretty good. Like, I mean, he was a little bit like hypey, but his content was actually legitimately well researched, and it was, more important for the EAT fanatics, reviewed by a doctor, because he is a doctor, and it still got hammered. Why? Probably there was some offsite stuff or some off-site reputation stuff that they might be looking at too. So yeah, for me, EAT is almost 100% links. I'm sure it helps a little bit if you have, reviewed by a doctor and they're really a doctor, and maybe Google knows the entity of that doctor, from LinkedIn or whatever. But I think it's mostly links.
Yeah, totally. And last community question, how would you go about solving the Parasite SEO situation? So I don't know if you Googling stuff like best male enhancement pill recently, but if you look, you see the top 5 rankers are like Miami Herald, Times Union, all these like media sites that people are just paying for sponsored content. Hard to penetrate past them, no pun intended. What would you do?
I mean, that's a Google problem. I'll let them worry about that. That sounds like they need to figure it out. I have enough stuff on my plate to solve Google's problems. But I mean, at the end of the day, that's an edit. Like, that's each site will have to handle that themselves, because Google isn't going to say, they're not going to be like, oh, we need to take domain authority out of the algorithm because these sites are getting a couple keywords are getting spammed, payday loans or whatever. So yeah, I think There's just those sites need to monitor what they're publishing and have an editor in chief, which a lot of them don't have anymore. They just publish whatever. If you have an editor in chief, that's the number one thing. They're going to have eyeballs on everything that gets published, and they're going to see that and be like, what the hell is this? Like, oh, we're not going to publish this. And that basically solves the problem right there.
But my opinion is that these are like normal media companies, newspapers back in the day. No one reads newspapers anymore. They're watching Graham Stephan on YouTube for their financial advice now. So they got to make some money. So they're selling sponsored content. They're making bank. Like each one of these posts is a few thousand. I think it's just their new business model. They're just like YOLO.
I'm sure they are. Like you said, they're a dying breed. People listen to Joe Rogan. They watch YouTube. It's a dying industry that's dying faster than we probably know. Like they know better than us because they see the numbers and they're probably freaking out and they're like, what can we do? So,
Yeah.
but I think Google will, like everything, if it gets out of hand, or especially if they get bad press for it, they'll make a move.
Yeah. Well, it's been a couple of years, man. And so like I'm an affiliate SEO, you might know that, but like a lot of my competitive keywords, this is how it looks these days. And you kind of have to like wiggle around them. It's nasty. But
yeah,
we'll see. We'll see. I got some personal questions for you now. Like, I don't know if you can say this or you want to say this, but where do you live these days?
I live in Lisbon, Portugal, most of the time.
You love it?
I love it. It's great. It's warm. It's got the beach. I'm a big tennis guy. I play tennis all the time, so it's perfect for that because it really never rains and it doesn't get too hot.
Nice. Where are you from originally?
Rhode Island.
Okay. All right, cool. What's your typical day look like? And are you still pretty hands-on with your SEO? Like just walk us through your typical day.
Yeah, I mean, usually I start work about an hour and a half after I get up. I'm kind of a slow starter. And yeah, it used to be different. Like up to about, if you asked me this question 2 years ago, it would have been writing. Like that's what I spent most of my time doing, is just creating content, creating material for a course, updating content. Like I was just a writing machine. For like a year, I wrote 2,000 words a day, every single day. And I got kind of burnt out on it, but it was like traffic went shot through the roof because I was able to publish so much stuff. But today I'm more of a manager type. Like I am reviewing work that comes in. I'm checking numbers, checking, financials and whatnot, and making sure things get done and things keep moving. I try to be like a catalyst and just push things forward and ask if anyone needs anything. That's sort of a roadblock that I can do to keep going. I don't spend almost any time in meetings or calls. So that's one thing that's kind of a rule I have, is I don't spend any time in meetings or calls. And I'm sort of addicted to Fortnite lately. So I've been playing Fortnite with my friends sometimes at lunch breaks.
Nice. Now, besides Fortnite, what habits and mindsets do you think have got you to where you are today?
I'd say the number one is reading books. I'm a voracious reader. Like I read a book a week at least. I reread books all the time. Like that's my kind of go-to hobby when there's downtime, is reading, whether it's fiction, nonfiction. I think I stopped reading business books a couple of years ago. I'm glad I did at the time, but they're too boring now. I just can't get through them. I feel like it's like a job. So for me, it's more of the act of reading, I think, is more important because it helps stimulate your brain. It helps you picture things in your mind. And it's a perfect antidote to digital. It's analog, it's static, it's low stimulation. And I think now more than ever, it's important to have like a physical book in your hand for downtime as opposed to a phone. So for me, that was the number one thing. The number two is being optimistic, being positive, no matter what's happening. Like I've had points in the business where things have gone horribly. Like with Exploring Topics, we weren't profitable for the first year and a half. I was just bleeding cash with this business. But I was, and it was obviously discouraging for the team because I'm transparent with financials with them. And they were like seeing that we're losing money. And they were actually asking me like, Brian, do you want to keep this going? Like we feel kind of bad losing money on this thing. I was like, well, I feel bad too. I don't want to lose money. It sucks. So, but I was like, let's just keep going, try a couple things. And luckily we turned it around. One example is when we first launched the paid product for Exploring Topics, it was a total dud. Like we were like, let's just create a beta of this paid product. And what we'll do is to have some sort of scarcity, we'll put a limitation on how many people can sign up. I think it was 30. And let's price it really low. That way we get 30 people in the door. We have some traction. We can get some, feedback from them. and like 15 people bought it. And we thought we were going to sell out in like an hour. So the email list is pretty big. Like now it's like 70,000. Then it was probably like 30,000. So we figure we can sell like 30 of these with a limited time and whatever. It didn't work. We just had to acquire. We planned to send an email like, we're sold out. Like it's too late. So then we build up all this anticipation for next time, but we never even got close to selling out. And it was, I mean, we only set to a segment of the list, but still, I mean, 30, it was pretty low. We set the bar really low on purpose so we could hit it.
Sure.
Didn't even hit that. So it was really discouraging because I had spent, money buying the site, running the site for over a year at this point, and had nothing to show for it except, a bunch of lost cash. So, but I was like, you know what? Let's just try to send to the whole list. We'll just clean up the operation a little bit. We'll create a proper landing page, make it a little less beta-ish. It's more expensive to do this because we have to hire a designer to make the page. We have to make the product better. We need to be a little bit more refined, but at least we can just give it a go. And if it doesn't work, we'll basically give up. And it worked. Thank God. So
Nice.
yeah. So for me, I think the number one thing was like that sort of ability to just give it one more shot. Otherwise, I don't think Exploring Topics would even exist. I don't think I've ever told that
Nice.
story before. So that's an interesting little anecdote.
Nice. Okay. I'm going to say a couple words. Tell me your first emotional reaction to them. SEO guru.
Like sick to my stomach. I don't know if that's an emotion. Yeah, I don't know if it's more of a physical feeling than an emotion.
Yeah.
But honestly, the best people at SEO are usually, you don't know their names. They usually run affiliate sites. They work in-house somewhere. Those are usually the best people in SEO. So for gurus, I mean, I don't like gurus in any niche. Like I follow people and I respect them in different areas like finance or investing or whatever. But I'm always wary to just look at someone and be like, this person's infallible. And they don't want you to look at them like that either because they know they're not.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a cringy word. I don't like when it's thrown at me, and I can't imagine you don't like when it's thrown at you. Because at the end of the day, it's not like when you're writing a content, you're writing it thinking like, oh my God, they're going to think I'm so smart. It's not like that. You're trying to provide value and get some traffic and just doing your normal SEO work. So I totally get that vomit feeling, sick to your stomach. I would like to shed that moniker whenever it comes my way as well. What's your response to the criticism? If you're so good at this stuff and you're so good at making money through SEO, then why do you teach it?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that one quite a bit. I feel like that's kind of a dated concept now that creators are are making so much money now. And the course for me, it came down to business model. Like I was always petrified when I ran affiliate sites that were 100% reliant on Google because I got wiped out so many times back in the day that I was just never comfortable with that. I just never comfortable with that. I want a business where it was diversified, that if my Google traffic went down by 25%, my revenue didn't go down by 25%. It wasn't like a one-to-one relationship. Also, I felt like I learned a lot more running a real business as opposed to ranking affiliate sites because I learned about product and branding, email marketing, which ended up being a huge skill to learn, social media marketing. Like you just learn kind of a lot more when you do that. So for me, it came down to business model that, I just loved, and I didn't want to be on the whim of some affiliate program. Like look at what Amazon has done with their affiliates over the last couple of years. I just didn't want to be in that position. I felt like it's the perfect business model in a way because you're like, you rank and bank, traffic's coming in, you don't have any customer support, no product, you don't have to worry about it. And I get that, and I've done that, so I understand it. But you're so on the precipice of going to zero instantly. So for me, that's the reason I went into the education space. I like the diversity of it, and it was, like I said, it wasn't a plan really. It was just this took off faster than my affiliate site, so I was like, let's just ride this wave.
Nice. Here's another personal one. What's your number? When is enough enough? When, like I heard you say 8 figures before, but when's enough for you to say like, I'm just going full tennis mode now. I'm just going to drink wine and play tennis these days.
I have thought about that a lot recently, as you might imagine. The number was never in my mind because I was never close to it. I don't really have one, but I would say I'm basically there now. So now I'm really questioning like who I want to work with, what I want to work on. I love tennis, but for me to just retire and play tennis, I would have to like live on a tennis court basically. I'm not someone who can be idle very long.
Mhm.
So I kind of like the balance I have now. I work on exploring topics with someone I really like working with on a project I like working with. I like working with SEMRush on this bigger. It's interesting to see this like perspective of this huge publicly traded company and how they do everything. It's just like on a scale that's unimaginable to us. It's
Yeah, yeah,
insane.
yeah.
So it's cool to see like how they work and just learn from like these really smart people that work there that built it into this huge thing. So I'm kind of enjoying what I'm working on, but I'm not as motivated. I'm already like trying to get into the practice of not doing anything for money, like
Hmm.
because it just doesn't. I honestly don't need it. So, but it's hard because your brain has been like hardwired over years to have every decision filtered through money, whether it's an expense or
Yeah.
income. Like, should I do this? Is an expense. Like recently, I just took my family. We went to Miami a couple weeks ago to celebrate the deal, and I flew them all in. We stayed in a nice hotel. It was awesome. We got hired private tennis instructors and everything. It was amazing. But I kept thinking in the back of my mind, this is so expensive. This is so expensive. So I have to sort of get out of that habit. And
Yeah.
also when it comes to revenue, be like, I don't want to do this thing, so I'm just not going to do it. I'm leaving money on the table,
Mm.
but who cares? And that's one of the things I respect most about Tim Ferriss is that when the 4 hour work week was like they're taking off, he could have easily turned that into like a guru thing. He could have easily had like the
Mm.
3 hour work week. He could have easily had courses and he would have killed.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
he could have done events, live events, come to the 4 hour work week,
Seminars.
seminars and done the upsells and like the go to the back of the room and sign up and have people like he could have done that so easily, but he didn't for the simple reason he didn't want to. So I've
Yeah.
always tried to internalize that now that I'm sort of at that number, I only want to do things because I want to do them. And if I'm leaving money on the table, oh well. Like I wouldn't really know how to spend it anyway. So that's something that I really respect about Tim Ferriss. And I always try to remind, not like what would Tim do, but like in a situation, I always think back to how tempting it must have been for him to go that route and ultimately not do it.
Sure. Totally. That's a really awesome answer, and it's good to hear your perspective on that. Here's a question. We're getting towards the end. Would you, let's say, like you had a cousin, a little cousin, he just graduated college. He's like, Brian, I want to do what you do. I want to do SEO. Would you recommend a new person to get into SEO in 2022 in this current landscape with this level of competition?
Oh, for sure. I still think there's plenty of space for new sites because there's always new niches that are untapped. There's always
Yeah.
little wrinkles you can find your little angle and work it. There's always something you can do. I mean, how I would recommend they get into it. I mean, I think they should definitely launch a site and try to do it themselves. That's the ultimate way to learn. I think also working in house somewhere can really be helpful, whether it's an agency or a company, to sort of learn the ropes. But you need to have your website at the same time because what a lot of people do is they work in house somewhere and they work on these huge sites that really has no little relevance to a normal person's site. Like they're working on these massive brands and they make a tweak and something goes up by a lot. It doesn't always work out like that with smaller sites. So I think it's always helpful to have your own site that you're trying to build and you can learn all the stuff like the T-shaped marketer stuff, the email, the branding, the design, the copywriting, all those things that aren't directly related to SEO but help with SEO a lot.
Nice, nice. Perfect piece of advice. Bro, that's all the questions I got for you. Thanks so much for being an open book. Big congrats. Big congrats on your whole journey.
Thank
It's
you.
been awesome to see like the growth of Backlinko. You become the de facto resource for information and then to exit it and now having questions about what's next in life. That's awesome, man. Applause to you.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it.
All right, take care. Be well.
See you later.